So we're back once again with another submission from a subscriber, and this one's pretty unique. It's a mushroom trip that results in the user ending up speaking in some form of like tongues or some strange alien language with little elements of English interspersed into it. It's really original. I've not had a report where someone actually sends voice lines accompanying it. So that adds a bit more flavour to the experience, and it's something I think you guys will really enjoy. I would like to begin this entry by explaining a little about myself and who I was before this experience. From a very young age it was clear I was of scientific mind, and my favourite words were apparently, "Dad, what's that?" an important attribute of a young scientist. My curiosity regarding the natural world was very strong. It poured through my personality and kick-started with a fascination of dinosaurs, which soon developed into a deep love for all things deep in time. The primary school I went to, supposedly a neutral public school, would have us sing religious songs or do prayers at assemblies. This I completely refused. The whole idea never sat right with me. The stories of religion that were taught to us just seemed like pure fantasy, especially next to my factual dinosaur books that were no match for the Bible, and that's what was important to me: facts. As I matured with age, the cosmos became my daydreamer's bedfellow, and I spent hours and hours contemplating topics far outside my grasp. However curious I was, it became clear this was not enough to succeed in academic environment. Plagued with dyslexia and a crippling anxiety about my own intellect, I decided to go unnoticed. The prospect of asking for help was non-existent, due to the cutthroat social climate that is secondary school. You'd be surprised how easy it is for a 13-year-old with dreadlocks down to his shoulders to blend in. The reading, writing and whole general format of the curriculum became so intimidating to me that I would completely shut off. The thing is, if you're well behaved, you become camouflaged. After all, a teacher has two things on their mind. One, to keep the naughties in check, and two, help those who are actively engaging with the work. That's all they really have time for. If you're outside of those groups, you can consider yourself free to sleep, and that's what I did. Luckily, moving into my adult life, a prestigious job in paleontology was no longer a requirement. My love of nature made it so that just simply being around it was enough for me to feel satisfied. Out of sheer luck, a forestry apprenticeship landed on my lap. Since high school I started showing signs of depression, exacerbated by excessive binge drinking and recreational drug use. I certainly never had a problem, more a case of too much too young. My work was often my main escapism when my experience wasn't being hindered by small-minded right-wing workies. However, the crevasse I was trying to fill in became too vast and I started to struggle. The same time I used to spend pondering the universe was now spent painstakingly revising every bad thing in my life, every encounter, every embarrassment, every non-achievement. The list goes on. I never had any traumatic experiences in my youth. I think of my childhood fondly. I went through a period of feeling guilty about my own depression. I felt I had nothing to complain about. I just couldn't grasp what was making me feel this way, so it certainly didn't feel justified. I remember at the time being very emotionally invested in the Syrian refugee crisis. I constantly compared my situation to theirs, and would conclude I had absolutely no reason to feel this way, and it almost made me feel I had no legitimacy, and so I went back to blending in. A few years of grind for the weekend passed, and in that time I became rather fond of psychedelics, but at the time was not aware of their true potential. They were always just recreational, silly fun to me. I had one very beautiful experience sat on a hill with some friends, where I felt as though I could sense the rotation of the earth. It came with a deep relaxation, and a more than normal appreciation for being on a planet. This experience was absolutely stunning, but far from visionary. That was yet to come. Yet another opportunity landed on my lap. An opportunity to move to America, the land of the free. A land that was to free me of my previous life and completely start afresh. To me, this was the answer. This was the tons of cement necessary to fill in the crevasse I had been trying to fill in Scotland. At first, things seemed good. My dream job, nice weather, a beautiful home. But they all just seemed after a while like novelties, and weren't at my core doing anything for how I felt. This is where things started to worsen. I felt I had completely exhausted my options. I literally changed everything in my life with no luck. I started to have suicidal thoughts following my dad having a heart attack. I already had so much going on in my head, so everything became so much more amplified. I started looking into mental health care, which was absurdly expensive. It got to the point where my suicidal tendencies were so concerning, I made the decision to open up and tell my dad and his wife, whom I was living with, that I needed to go home to seek help through the NHS. I won't dive deep into my return, however what I will say is it didn't take me long to fall into old habits, and I was back to living for the weekend again. Ironically, I made a conscious decision to steer well clear of psychedelics due to my mental health, which was no doubt influenced by unscientific propaganda surrounding these compounds. All the while I was stuffing my nose with all sorts of shady powders and rinsing it down with copious amounts of booze. One of these weekend-long excursions, a friend brought some DMT. I knew what it was and still probably smoked it for all the wrong reasons, but nonetheless had a really good time. The dose was low due to the amount wasted to the bottom of our dodgy tin can pipe, but it was still enough to take me straight to a strong acid level trip. Now, this in itself wouldn't be worth mentioning if it wasn't for the fact that the DMT came with an overwhelming sense of clarity. It was made so abundantly clear to me that I should be exploring psychedelics. I now believe that it was this experience that brought me to where I am today. A year and a half later, I'm exploring using mushrooms to better myself, with success. I no longer drink and have kicked smoking along with other things. Me and my partner one night went out picking and found a good-sized harvest, enough for a couple full-blown trips. We eyeballed what we thought was enough for a strong trip, and I made the mushrooms into a tea. We began our ritual of watching moving art in 4K, which, by the way, I highly recommend. The trip came on fast for both of us. Within 20 to 30 minutes we were fully gone. At this point I remember lots of laughter, and with the laughter came with this odd low ah sound deep within my throat. It felt as though I was holding something back. My partner could hear this, but I didn't mention that I felt as though I was holding something back. She's fairly new to tripping and wanted to do anything to make her experience as typical as possible. That, however, didn't last. Because our laughter was rudely interrupted by a fucking anomaly, a strange unexplainable bang kept occurring in our hall. One of those only while tripping moments. The noise happened every couple of minutes or so, and because of my total lack of belief in anything but the physical, I shrugged it off as the house settling or something like that. It just went on for too long. I had to investigate. I went through to the hall and it stopped. I couldn't shake this feeling that whatever made the sound was present with me. It triggered a complete paradigm shifting experience, and I was flooded with knowledge, pouring out of nowhere. These deep insights of universal consciousness, that everything in the universe is the same thing, and that everything on a fundamental level is intimately connected. I had recently lost my dad, and felt 100% confident that it was now okay. I felt as though he went home. I kept wishing this experience on him before his death. I knew how much this experience would benefit someone at the end of their life. These insights were so beautiful that they made me cry. Sobering up, I kept trying to rationalise what had happened to me, but considering what I believed in before, I could not. From an evolutionary perspective, this shouldn't be possible. Naturally, I turned to Google and was astonished by how many people have had these experiences. I thought, how is this not part of a wider discussion? How can it be that a chemical naturally occurring can cause an experience so far outside any ecological pressure that our brains would have been exposed to during their evolution? The fact that a die-hard atheist like myself can be exposed to such an experience is certainly at the very least food for thought. I knew straight away that I needed to do further exploration. So I took the advice of the legend himself, Terence McKenna. The heroic dose was next. My partner went home that night, as Terence famously said, "Go it alone." And thank God I listened, for I was about to stumble across an anomaly that would dwarf the noise in my hall. I made my tea and went straight to bed. Once again the trip came on quick. Everything seemed fairly normal until this wave of laughter came over me. That strange noise had come back, only this time I wasn't holding it back. It felt as though something was laughing through me. The strange noise in my throat I had never made before started to develop into something far more peculiar. My head was forced back so I'm facing the ceiling, and I began to make these cracking dolphin-like sounds.
Fucking Jesus. I literally hiss like a snake, eh? I can't believe that I can do this every time I trap, eh? When I done it in the house, Mum asked me to stop. Yeah. Huh? What? What? Please don't. Oh, well then he's got food. Eto ski I sky kick up baby but fiki go to go ski go kick up go to coca baby but fiki go kick ski go to for kick oh could you pass that water please? Don't throw it. Hey, thank you. Thank you very much. Whoo! You should do this. Este fue que toquía.
I didn't realise what was happening to me, because it all came with unobtainable amounts of pleasure. It felt like a total release, or something only akin to an orgasm, but better. I must have sat there for at least 10 minutes before I thought, wow, wait a minute, what's actually happening here? And suddenly it hit me. It was a language. My pleasure turned to pure excitement. I rushed to the phone to share this with my girlfriend. She wasn't too impressed. Quite frankly, it freaked her out. At the time, it was presented to me as the most important thing that's ever happened, not just to me, but potentially to humanity. In the first recordings, you hear me exclaim things like, "straight to the Joe Rogan experience," and that I wanted to change my mum's life with the recordings I took. I'm not delusional. I realised pretty quickly when I was sober that everyone would just think I was mad. At least the types of people who could make a difference with such information, which I believe to be a damn shame. I've even emailed scientists studying if psychedelics can reveal the true nature of reality, one being very unnecessarily rude, another ignoring me, and another telling me it's more common than you think. The reason I believe this is a shame is I think the academic community needs to remember there are massive gaps in our understanding of the true nature of reality. Just as a personal note here, the reason science dismisses psychedelics and woo-woo phenomena is because it literally doesn't have the means to examine it. Science is completely restricted by the materialistic paradigm. It cannot break out of this because this is the only way in which it will function. Say, if you were to give a scientist a fat dose of DMT, it would completely shatter his entire perception of what reality is, which is everything is governed by physics, everything is made out of atoms, everything we touch is material. But when you take high doses of psychedelics, this entire thought piece boils down into nothingness. Science is just as dogmatic as religion, but because of its, and I will admit, its amazing achievements and the great world that we live in comparison to the dark ages where religion ruled everything, we take science as the be-all and end-all. But I guarantee within our lives, science will have no choice but to merge with metaphysics and spirituality in order for us to further understand reality with the help of chemicals like psychedelics. But right now, scientists have such a massive ego. Take Neil deGrasse Tyson, for example. He dismisses everybody else's opinion because he is so deeply embedded in his own biases that if you were to give him DMT, we would just straight up refuse it because he'll just say, oh, it's brain stuff, it can all just be explained as brain stuff, which is actually not the case. Reality is far more mystical than we give it credit for. And yeah, I just wanted to intersperse that bit. Let's get back to the recording. Not only that, gaps that may be relevant to the psychedelic space, the hard problem of consciousness, the gaps of the understanding of the quantum realm, coupled with how little we have researched these chemicals. So I believe it is unscientific to claim that what happened to me wasn't real, because they simply don't have enough to date to dismiss my claims. I feel there is hope when you pair all of these things, some of which I haven't even mentioned, such as the hyperdimensionality of the DMT space, and its potential correlation with how maths allows for higher dimensions, which should be an obvious one, because why should we even be able to perceive higher dimensions? What use is that for a three-dimensional being? Also the similarity between the DMT space and the near-death experience. It surely must be only a matter of time before this is more widely accepted. I know I never coined these ideas, and I stand on the shoulders of giants with what I'm saying, and it may seem woo-woo, but it really isn't. This doesn't change what we already know in science as fact, only that consciousness is a fundamental law of reality to be taken more seriously. Since my experience, I've decided I want to go back to school to find a path to study psychedelic and consciousness research. I want to end this by thanking Vivek for giving me this opportunity to tell my story. Aw, cheers mate. I truly believe people like him spreading awareness have a greater purpose in this life than they realise. I hope you enjoyed the recordings, and thanks for listening.